Mayor Ramsey, I think we're ready to get started. We've got a good number already in, and I'm sure more will continue to join.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get going. I see that we're recording. Thank you for the thumbs up that we're good to go. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here with us electronically today. Today is February 1st. Can you believe we've made it to February 1st, 2021, the start of the third week of the legislative session, and this is the Utah League of Cities and Towns Legislative Priority Committee meeting. My name is Dawn Ramsey. I'm the mayor of South Jordan City, and I have the privilege of serving as chair of the LPC this year. And I just want to welcome all of you for being here and thank you for your efforts across the state being part of our League Army. We're going to open this morning by approving our minutes from January 25th of 2000. The agenda says 20, but I know it's 2021. And so I will ask for a motion in the chat if there's a motion to approve our minutes, and a second, and then I'll invite you all to vote by chat. If you have any questions or concerns, any amendments you'd like made, also please let us know in the chat. Okay, I have a motion by Shannon Ellsworth and a second by Clint Morris and Michelle Randall. Okay, thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes from our January 25th, 2021 meeting, please indicate in the affirmative through the chat. And Carson or Roger, I'll let one of you let us know when we've reached our threshold. It looks to me like we're probably there, but
I think you got a few more to go. But
okay, we'll hang on just a quick minute. Thank you.
Carson, what's our total registered?
We're looking like we're 122.
Okay.
For those who may just be joining us, we are voting in the chat on whether or not you approve our minutes from January 25th, 2021. If so, please indicate so in the chat.
We need 73. We're there.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to each of you for participating, and again for your patience with our electronic format. It's challenging. I can't see any of you. However, I appreciate you being here and we appreciate your participation. Okay, we're just going to move right on. Number 2 is session engagement. We're just going to turn it to Wayne and let him run us through really the engagement and remind us how we can be engaged this unique legislative session. So Wayne, we'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Mayor Ramsey. Kirsten, you want to go to the next slide. Just want to go over really quickly about the type of emails that we're sending out to make sure you're aware that there are some differences. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that we send out a daily email, just kind of wrapping up the day's actions and put any kind of action alerts in those daily emails. And so when you see an action alert, we're asking you to contact your legislator or follow up with someone regarding information that will be in that email. On the right, you'll see that the title will say Legislative Action Alert. That means we've sent this one to you specifically with a specific assignment. And so we're hoping that when you see Legislative Action Alert that you'll realize it's imperative that you respond and take whatever information in that email and take action. For example, this past week, we've obviously had the ADU bill up. We sent out an action alert and a number of you responded, and obviously that did have an impact. And so thank you for that. Next slide. If you're getting our LPC emails, if you feel like you're not getting your daily email or you're not receiving enough information from the league, you can change your subscription or sign up for additional information. If you just go to our website and go to contact us, on the left-hand side, you'll see a subscribe. Click that and that will take you to this page where you can, again, subscribe to the emails and information that we're sending out. So again, if you're not receiving a daily email or action alerts and you would like to receive those, make sure you fill out that page. Next slide.
So again, we'll start, we'll be using the V-voting software today. for official votes. So most of you probably are familiar with the drill. We'll use the same link every week. I'll drop the link here again in the chat box if you need it. Please go ahead and connect now in another tab or on your phone or another device. And then we won't be doing a fun test question today since we're short on time, but I'll open it up here in a moment for inputting your name and city information. So if you're an LPC member, please click that link. This should be familiar, but you'll be prompted with a text box, and please just enter your name and city.
There's a question in the chat from Carrie about have text alerts started? And the answer is no. We have not sent out a text alert because we're trying to balance making sure we don't use that too often and only when we need to. So great question.
All right. So we'll just give folks another minute to finish that up.
We have a hand up by Norm Searle. Norm, did you have something that you wanted to say? Is that I never know if that is intentional or sometimes it happens to all of us on accident.
Norm, if you'd like, you can speak, but you are currently muted.
No, I'm fine. That was not meant to be a wave to you. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and close up this input box. So thank you for everybody who's filled it out. As a reminder, please keep this tab open because we'll be asking for an official vote at the end. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Okay. If we're done with that, we're going to move forward. Are we ready for number 3 on our agenda? All right. Looks like it. Okay. We're going to discuss legislation. That's why we're here. We've got this legislative outlook. We're going to start with Cameron, who's going to take it on land use.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Happy February. As always, we start with our policy prism of respect, collaborations, and outcomes. And I'm going to come back to the outcomes in a moment when we talk about the ADU bill, because we've spent a lot of time since Friday working on trying to figure out the best approach to respect or to meet these pillars of respect, collaboration, and outcomes on House Bill 82. Continue, Carson. Before we jump into 82, though, I do want to bring up 2 different letters that are important for you to share. 1, to share with legislators, and 2, for you to take individual action. So first, the League Board, a couple of weeks ago, which Mayor Ramsey might as well have been 2 years ago with the way the last 2 weeks have felt. The League Board adopted these 4 principles around infrastructure investment. We shared them with you last week. The other organizations listed here have also endorsed them, and we have submitted a joint letter of support and principles for state infrastructure investment to the entire legislature and to Governor Cox's administration. So we will be sending a link to that letter in tonight's nightly email, and we urge you to share that letter with your legislators. This is a great opportunity to demonstrate the collaboration between local and state government leaders as we plan for population growth and invest in infrastructure. The second letter, it also deals with transportation, but it's focused on active transportation. And that link will also be in tonight's email. And you as an individual mayor council member can sign that letter, and that petition will then go to to legislators as well to support general investment in active transportation. If anyone wants to put the link to the active transportation letter in the chat box, you can. Otherwise, again, we'll have both of those in tonight's email. Forward march. All right, let's jump into land use. I'll take House Bill 82, and then Victoria will jump in on the other land use bills. Next slide. House Bill 82 has generated a lot of media attention in the last couple of days. There was an article in today's Deseret News and an op-ed in Salt Lake Tribune. There was a terrific committee hearing Friday afternoon in the House Business and Labor Committee. And we want to, as staff, thank the League Army for reaching out to legislators, raising concerns, and showing up in person and afar to testify in committee. It led to a really terrific 90-minute policy discussion around HB 82 first sub and eventually HB 82 second sub. So thank you for reaching out. They are inundated right now with electronic communication. So make sure you know how your legislator wants to communicate with you, and put your city and position email subject lines to get the attention both of legislators and their interns. But thank you for helping drive the discussion around ADUs on Friday. Next slide, Carson. A new ADU bill came out today. We've been expecting this one for a while. This comes from House leadership. Representative Val Peterson is the sponsor. Before anybody overreacts to this one, this is basically the first sub of House Bill 82, plus this impact fee component that we've been hearing about for the last few weeks. We were just waiting to see what that would look like. So while our recommendation right now is to oppose, it's going to be part of a larger conversation here because now there are essentially 3 ADU bills all in the same space within the House of Representatives. So Carson, go to the next slide. So let's talk through what happened and where we're at with these 2 bills. And then I'm going to take a step back and talk about big picture objectives and outcomes. So both the first substitute, which we talked about briefly last week, and the second substitute, which Representative Jim Dunnigan sponsored, both would still create a state mandate to allow owner-occupied internal ADUs in all single-family zones. When Representative Ward's bill, which now mirrors Representative Val Peterson's bill, the city may not regulate size of the internal ADU, the frontage size of lot. Representative Ward's bill does specify that you can only have 1 internal ADU within the footprint of the home and that you may require 1 additional parking spot. As we reached out to legislators last week, we raised all the concerns we'd heard from cities. But generally speaking, cities were supportive of ADUs. In fact, more than 60 cities have enacted ordinances in recent years to allow for ADUs, and that where cities have regulated ADUs, it's been because of health, safety, and welfare reasons, or for general community planning reasons, such as around parking. Representative Dunnigan is a former Taylorsville City Council member, and he understands what you go through as city leaders, where you're trying to balance all of these different policy interests. And so he drafted this second substitute that provided additional standards that cities could regulate. So it goes beyond what was in Representative Ward's bill. During the Friday afternoon committee hearing, rather than adopt the first sub or the second sub, the policy conversation really focused at the level of should the state essentially preempt local governments and mandate owner-occupied internal ADUs in all single-family zones, why or why not? And if the state did mandate owner-occupied internal ADUs in all single-family zones, then what should the city be then able to regulate, and what does that actually mean? So you can see on Representative Ward's side, his list is quite small, but he has indicated multiple times to league staff, league officers, and other league representatives that he's willing to look at other pieces, including enforcement and issues related to short-term rentals. You know, Representative Dunnigan was really focusing on adding the number of standards, and there are additional standards that we've been discussing that are not yet in his second sub. So let me pause there to see if there are any questions about the specifics of these 2 bills before I jump to the bigger conversation about the overall outcomes. So Paul, Larson from Brigham City said, what is to prevent an owner from applying for a permit to expand the size and or appearance of the single family dwelling without disclosing a plan to convert to an ADU, and then apply for the ADU after a certificate of occupancy is obtained? Paul, that's a very fair question, and that's one of the process questions that we've asked of legislators, because Representative Ward has said we want to keep it to the footprint of the existing home. But you're right, the timing and the sequencing of this can matter. So Evelyn Everton from Sandy said, Representative Schultz spoke in favor of holding the bill. Yep, that's because he and I spent a lot of time in the hallway during that committee hearing, going back and forth about Ward's original version, the first sub, the second sub, and the Val Peterson bill, which we knew was en route. I am not going to put words in his mouth about the second sub because he didn't say if leadership would support it or not, but he acknowledged that the second sub moved the needle for cities and recognized that we needed time to consider it and that we were bringing up additional issues bigger than the second sub, and he acknowledged that it was important to have that policy discussion, which you heard him say in the committee hearing that he wants all the parties to come to the table. And in fact, he's been texting me as we've been talking. So I am checking right now to make sure he had, okay, he just said, call me when you're done. So there you have it. I was hoping he could drop an announcement that maybe they were going to stop all the bills, but yeah, it's 2021. So we have the space now as we have been trying to negotiate different paths forward. And with the second sub, we as staff have been working on an alternative that we shared with some key league members this morning that builds on Dunnigan's second sub, but also addresses some of the other issues that have arisen. We will be discussing, we're actually meeting with Representative Dunnigan later this afternoon, and we're meeting with the governor's staff, senior staff tomorrow morning. Then I'll be meeting with Representative Schultz whenever he gets back to me. Are there any other questions about the specifics here before I jump to the outcomes piece on ADUs?
So Cam, there's a question in the Q&A box.
Oh, there is. Okay, so from Christine up in Conwood Heights, what is the mechanism to have the ADU owner pay additional property taxes, since this will increase the number of people who live in our cities and impact our services? So, council member, that is actually a perfect segue to my next slide. So I'm going to leave the Q&A box open so that I don't forget to answer your question. And if I don't answer it, then drop a note saying you still didn't answer it. As we've been having these discussions over the last few months with both House leadership and with the greater business community, because not only does the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce support the concepts within House Bill 82, but many of the other chambers of commerce around the state do as well. We've identified these 5 as their top objectives. First and foremost being to increase the housing supply. The second is a comment that came up with Speaker Wilson when the officers, Victoria and I met with him, and that was to have more minimum standards across cities. And this dovetails with number 4, which is the quote unquote bad actor cities. And you know, I've spent my whole career at the league basically fighting public policy by anecdote, but to a degree, it's, you know, the whole bad actor concept is bad policy by anecdote. Number 3 is to reduce the quote unquote unnecessary city regulations and fees. And this has really been a big issue for Representative Ward, in addition to just being able to exercise property rights, is that he feels like, whether he's right or not, feels like that city regulations are what is preventing owners from converting their basements into apartments, which then in turn could help alleviate some of the challenges with the housing supply. We've pushed back and said we think the bigger reasons are either market driven, or people just not wanting strangers in their house, or code issues that his bill actually would help address in the financing tool, because it costs money to convert your house. And then number 5 is the overall objective of investing state money in infrastructure and having all of these pieces work together: infrastructure, economic development, transportation, and housing. From a local government perspective, we have our league resolution from 2018 and conversations over the last few years of what is the city's role in housing supply. We have no keys over market forces, though we do have keys in the land use space. A key objective is to preserve our local legislative authority to plan your community, also to preserve the local regulation of health, safety, and welfare, and preserve the local revenues, and Christine, this gets to your point, that fund those services and infrastructure. And those local revenues are primarily property and sales taxes, but it's also the fees that are charged to new development, whether that new development is brand new housing or redeveloped areas, or in this case, internal ADUs, and what's the right balance, and what are the actual impacts from the internal ADUs, and how are those funded when you have more residents in the same space. And so these are all the pieces that, and then partnering with the state, of course, on infrastructure and planning, because we're all in this together as we try to plan for population growth. So as we've met with the league officers and we've put together a team of key city leaders that reflect the diversity of cities within the ADU space, we're trying to find the middle ground between these objectives. The middle ground of having sufficient local authority while recognizing the pressure and the stated outcome to facilitate the expansion of internal ADUs. So as we try to thread that needle, you can go to the next slide, Carson. What we're proposing to you is this group of 5 elected officials, plus, and this would be in addition to the league officers, Mayor Caldwell obviously being a league officer as well. But we've tried to highlight individuals from each of our caucuses and who come from communities that are in different stages of growth and have different unique challenges. So we've got a small group that represents the diversity within the league, working with the senior staff and officers to try to meet those objectives that I just highlighted and try to thread the needle on those pieces, building off of the language within Representative Dunnigan's second substitute. That could be the language to preserve the land use authority. It could be the language to ensure that you have the authority to have certain standards around internal ADUs, and it could be pieces around the revenue, and realistically a combination of all of the above. So Mayor Ramsey, I'm going to stop there because I know I've thrown a lot out there about the approach on ADUs, and see if there are additional questions. I see, oh yes, Lynn, about the recourse for the cities with the bad actor property owners. Yeah, that's a great point, Lynn. Lynn's Sandy City attorney, and this is something that Representative Ward has been very open to discuss what this actually looks like. So let's just play this out so that everybody's clear of what we're talking about. Let's say the state does step in and say every single family zone now must allow an owner-occupied internal ADU, okay? But within that, there are certain standards that are required, one of which would be that it has to be owner-occupied, not absentee owner-occupied, but somebody actually lives there as their primary resident. So as a result, one thing we've been talking about is how do we make sure that we can actually enforce that? Provo City could give you the horror stories of the amount of code enforcement impact and burden that they have from being a college town with older neighborhoods and parking challenges and the like. So, how do you make sure you have the tools to enforce that? So again, he's open to that piece, and that has come up a lot. Councilmember Randy from Moab said, could you just restate where we're at keeping these ADUs from being used short-term rental? So right now the bills, all 3 bills are silent, but that's another standard that we have brought up in our discussions, is that if we're really truly trying to focus on ensuring sufficient housing for long-term residents, then we shouldn't have a state mandate that potentially opens up zoning, or a state mandate that says we're going to allow these internal ADUs in more places, and make sure that these really are for long-term occupants, not short-term occupants. And Representative Ward has been very open to that in our discussions with him. Aaron from Highland, conflicting answers on Representative Ward's substitute impacts all existing properties or any new development. Yeah, this is a great point. The intent is both the old neighborhood around Capitol Hill and the new development in Harriman and everything in between. So any single family zone, whether it's existing or new development, would have this state entitlement therein. So that's the intent. Whether the language totally gets there or not in any of the drafts, that's a different story, but the intent is for all single family zones. Okay, another question from Dawn in South Jordan. What do you believe would be the outcome if we took a position of just opposing any state mandate on this issue? This is why I love Don Shelton, because he cuts right to the point. Mayor Ramsey, you know what I mean. So, Councilmember Shelton, if we opposed all of the bills, we know this is a top priority for House leadership. When I say top priority, this particular bill, Speaker Wilson told us on Friday, is his #1 priority at this point. So there will be a lot of pressure in the House to pass the bill. At this point, we're still trying to ascertain where the Senate is. The different senators we've spoken to have been a little dodgy. We're meeting with the governor's staff again tomorrow morning, and we've asked the governor's staff about where the governor is on this particular bill. And I think both of those groups are trying to keep some distance to allow for time to negotiate, and it is still just the 3rd week of the session. So there's still plenty of time to negotiate and get the bills right. If we are simple opposition on the state mandate, then we will be asking the Senate to say no, and we'd be asking the governor to veto, as opposed to potentially trying to thread the needle and find a middle ground, which may not go far enough for what House leadership wants, but that may be easier for our friends in the Senate and for the governor to say, yeah, we think that House Bill 82 goes too far. This is a more reasonable approach. So I guess the answer, council member, is if we just said no and you contacted your legislators and said, we need you to vote no on this bill and push, and we see where the pieces fall, and we may have to live with a bill that could cause a lot of problems down the line, or we try to mitigate some of those problems now and see if we can thread the needle and find common ground. Okay, Mayor Mann from Highland. Not sure anyone is working with accurate data. Highland, we allow ADUs. Our best estimate is that only 5% have gone through the permitting process, ditto in Lehigh. A lot more ADUs out there than some believe. I'm glad you brought this point up too, because this focus on ADUs and city regulations of ADUs is not unique to Utah. The state of California, for example, their assembly has preempted cities on ADUs, and cities now have to allow ADUs in every single family zone. In the state of New York, they just opened up a bill file that would do something similar, and bills like this are popping up all over the country when I talk to my colleagues in other leagues. One issue that's come up in those other states that is worthy of discussion here would be what happens to those current ADUs that don't have a permit. Should there be some sort of grace period for them to come through the new city process under whatever the new bill says? That way we would have data and we would understand how many ADUs are out there. One potential way to do that is that we could go back to the framework within SB 34, because SB 34 provides the menu and every city can choose from the menu. And within Salt Lake County, for example, all cities but 2 selected ADUs, okay? So all those cities but those 2 currently, as part of their annual report, are listing the number of ADUs for which they have records. So if there's some sort of incentive for people who are currently using illegal ADUs to get them permitted, then we get better information about how widespread they are. So that could be a potential tie within SB 34 that the negotiating team could pursue. Okay, Seth Perrins from Spanish Fork, you're welcome. Said they generally have 2 types of homes, single family homes with their own 4 walls and multifamily homes that are attached and share a wall. And sometimes you have multifamily homes and single family. So we prefer the focus to be on the home type itself as opposed to the zone. Yeah, so this has been subject of kind of a back and forth dialogue because there are some within the legislature who simply want all owner-occupied residential units to be able to have an internal ADU. So whether that's a condo, whether that's multifamily, whether that's single family, you know, they want that to be the priority. We've pushed back because of the, you know, fundamental nature of zoning and planning. And so again, I think there's space for deliberation on that language. Councilmember Wharton from Salt Lake says, why is this such a high priority? Why are they focused on this, especially when most cities are allowing ADUs? That's a great question because we have countered that over 60 cities have authorized ADUs in recent years. Ultimately, the feeling is cities are still, they've authorized them on paper, but it's not resulting in more ADUs. And this is the quote unquote low-hanging fruit to facilitate the creation of more housing units within the housing crunch. Mary Danes from Logan, how do legislators balance the property rights of the owner next door to a mandated ADU when they purchased a home in a single family neighborhood expecting some security and continuity? We raised that exact point with several committee members last week because they were making the property rights argument, and we were responding that this is a property rights argument for those neighbors as well, and the expectations that they had. And for some, that did resonate. And this gets back to that space between the mandate in all zones versus having a state mandate, but allowing cities to determine which areas make sense and which areas don't. But the state would still have the mandates, and it has to be, you have to allow them somewhere. And then you go through the regulations and figure out which ones, you know, the state could say, we're not going to allow you to regulate this, but we'll allow you to regulate that. I think that's part of the thread the needle approach that we'll have to have on this one. Well, assuming you accept the staff recommendation. Roger Baker from Tooele, unless the public policy behind the owner occupancy requirement is really clear and strong, it may not be worth pushing this issue at the expense of the more important issues given the difficulty of enforcing the owner occupancy requirement. And so this gets to the point of the check, and this actually comes back to Mayor Daines' point, that the check on the negative impacts to the neighbors, ideally, is that the owner is still living in the house and has relationships with the neighborhood, and you're not going to have those same types of negative impacts. Okay, let's see here. Okay. A couple of just back and forth on how to do the motion. Okay, Mayor Ramsey. Oh, never mind, you. That was you. I don't need to read what you said. Ken Leatham from North Salt Lake. If the bill could avoid being a one-size-fits-all, the league could get behind support if it's the right size or lot and unit. Ken, I'm glad you brought that up because that's been one of our major points has been the one-size-fits-all. And if there's a way to thread the needle to still preserve some sufficient local flexibility, cities are not opposed to ADUs. That's why so many cities have enacted ordinances in the first place. So this is not about ADUs per se. It's really about those bigger objectives that we're trying to meet. Yeah, Paul said, any discussions in the halls of the Capitol about working on the private sector side of the housing affordability? Yeah, we bring it up, but it falls on deaf ears. So you mentioned developer fees, finance fees, etc. Okay, Melinda from South Jordan asks if Representative Ware is how messy this legislation would be with existing HOA CC&Rs. The answer is yes, he is. HOA reps testified at the committee on Friday. And to his credit, Representative Ward is trying to say, shouldn't matter if your neighborhood is in an HOA or not in an HOA. I think all neighborhoods should have these internal ADUs. Okay. Yeah, Chris Porter, great point. Requiring this in every zone will lead to increased requirements for all houses and raising housing prices. Yeah, so we've actually, we brought this one up too, that the market is going to respond in unique ways. The market, you may create additional rental housing, which may be more affordable on one end, but if every house has this new amenity, then you actually will increase the resale cost of the housing. Okay, Gail Miller from Bear River City asks, how does a city know that the owner is still living there? And that is, Gil, that's the owner-occupied enforcement piece that we've been trying to wrap our heads around, of how to have that tool, and not just a tool that exists on paper, but one that is actually usable. So you don't have absentee owners and houses, houses moving away from owner occupancy that are in single family areas. Then somebody posted a link that I will just put to all panelists and attendees about the national trend here. Yep, and then Ken Leatham from North Salt Lake echoes a point that Jake from Vineyard, not Jake from State Farm, but Jake from Vineyard made at the committee hearing on Friday, that cities may stop approving more effective affordable housing units like small lots if this mandate passes. And that is a real concern. So Mayor Ramsey, I believe I made it through all of the questions in the chat. And what's helpful about these questions is it validates a lot of the points that we've been making and has brought up a few additional points as we continue on the negotiation. Mayor Ramsey, our recommendation is take these individuals that are listed, partnering with the league officers and senior staff to keep working on a counter proposal that builds off of Representative Dunnigan's proposal to try to split that difference to provide sufficient local authority and flexibility, while also trying to meet the objective of facilitating internal ADUs. Oh, I have one more question from Adam and Lyndon that just came in. So Lyndon has pointed out they've allowed owner-occupied ADUs since the mid-90s, but over 3,000 homes, only 200 have been built in the last 30 years, with maybe another 100 that are illegal because the personal preference of homeowners and their home layout really dictated. That's a point we've been making as well, that Representative Ward's response is that there are enough government obstacles that influences an individual's decision and to not pursue the ADU. And if you remove some of those obstacles, that they may be more willing to do it. That's the hypothesis that we have been going back and forth on over the last few weeks. And then Mayor Lewis from Bountiful said, we are making adjustments to our ADU ordinance according to needs, and this legislation is premature. And that's a key point from SB 34 is many cities over 60 now have selected ADUs and are working through that process. And so we've been making that argument. The problem we've been running into is as we talk to legislators and make many of these arguments, either they are not hearing from US cities or they're just hearing overwhelmingly from those who are supportive of the bill, and the city voices are being drowned out. So this feedback is terrific, but this feedback needs to go to your representatives and senators about why HB 82 first sub goes too far and why we need to do a better job of threading the needle. Mayor Ramsey, I think that is now everything.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone participating. I know it's not easy to have a discussion, a robust discussion the way we would like to, but this is working. I hope you feel like it's working. It is the very best we can do. And I just really appreciate all of you participating and all of the help from staff in facilitating this and Cam answering questions. Okay, we have a motion on the table from Carrie Malkovich of Woodland Hills and a second by Sean Guzman of St. George to approve the staff recommendation for the league negotiators, this list that you can see on your screen in addition to the league officers, to work with Representative Dunnigan to try to get his bill to a place that we all are okay with. So please, please vote using the link. If you are a voting member, let us know how you feel. If you approve that, please say yes. If not, say no. Thank you, Wayne, for sharing that link again.
As the votes continue to come in, Mayor Ramsey, let me make one other important announcement. Based on the feedback that we've received here and in light of the counter proposal that we are working on, we will likely have a quick follow-up survey in the nightly email tonight to check on a couple of key points for feedback from you. So watch for that survey. It'll go out to everybody, but we'll ask for cities and whether you're an LPC voting member in that survey. Again, just to help us make sure we're prioritizing the right pieces here as we look at that balance of your zoning authority, ability to regulate impacts and enforce your ordinances, as well as the revenue piece.
Cam, you're at over a majority and over 2/3, even though this isn't a position on a bill.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. If I can't see the results, but so I guess you're ready, Carson, to share the results.
The vote is currently closing and the result screens are loading. So it looks like a clear yes.
Okay. Thank you for everyone who participated in that. We appreciate your feedback and hearing from you. And it looks like we have a very strong majority that said yes. So that will be the direction. Proceed with that group. All right. Cam, moving on. Outdoor advertising amendments.
Yep, I'll turn it over to Victoria to hit SB 61 and House Bill 98. We reversed the orders because it builds on 98 builds on 82.
Right. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Cam. We've discussed a lot about HB 98 in this body. I think you're all aware of what the bill does, limiting plan reviews and timelines and allowing builders to inspect their own work, and also limiting the design elements that a municipality can impose. Thanks to all of you for helping us and other stakeholders pushing back on this bill. We've heard from leadership that it's apparent to them that HB 98 in its current form cannot pass. And so while they recognize it won't pass, leadership has still asked us to engage on a couple of things that they're concerned about. And they're not small things still, but they're concerned about a recourse for applicants when a city does fail to meet deadlines on plan reviews or inspections. And they are interested in changing authority or prohibiting authority on some design elements. The current bill has a rather long list of design elements that it has, and it's our understanding that leadership wants to focus on just a handful of those. And so we're still in a opposition to this bill, but we are recommending that we continue to gauge on the highlighted issues. And I know I've had a flurry of emails on this in my inbox this morning that I have not gotten to yet. I know that Gary Crane and Mark Stratford and others have been working a lot and talking to the Home Builders Association on the items in this bill. I don't know if Gary's out there or anyone else wants to speak to that. But at this point, we want you to know that our opposition has made a difference on this bill. It will not pass in its current form, but we are engaging with members of the House to see what we can do to address the concerns about cities who fail to meet those deadlines and better understand the design elements that they do want to touch on. Any questions on HB 98?
No question, just to say thank you to everybody who participated and helped reach the point where we're going to be able to be in a better place with this. Not have it pass as a button.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, next slide, Carson. Another bill we've talked a lot about is SB 61 outdoor advertising amendments. Let's see, Ken Leatham, okay, I'll follow up with Ken on the design elements. So thanks, Ken. Again, we're still finding out what those elements are. SB 61 outdoor advertising amendments. Again, this requires that a city or county allow any static billboard to change to an electronic sign. It does not matter the location of the billboard. If the billboard owner wants to upgrade, they get to upgrade. There is language limiting the curfew that you can put on electronic signs. And there are also provisions changing the minimum light standards. So we have a meeting, we had a meeting with the industry last week in Senator Sandel. Senator Sandel sees this very much as a property rights issue. He questions why some cities will allow on-premise signs to be animated and electric, but will not allow off-premise signs to be animated or electric. And he sees this as a disparity between two property rights holders, and feels quite strongly about that. We are meeting with a small team with Senator Sandel today, this afternoon, to meet with him, and then we'll probably have another follow-up meeting with industry. We are trying to better understand Senator Sandel's concern and see if we can address some of his equity concerns, and also help him understand some of the language that's already in code for billboards. Senator Sandel has not been involved in the billboard fights of the past. He's somewhat new to this issue, so we want to make sure he truly understands the off-premise, on-premise, and non-conforming issues that surround billboards. So stay tuned on outdoor advertising. Carson, if you go to the next slide. On that note, we put these talking points up last week, but please keep talking to your legislators. And while I was listening to this meeting, I got an email about another billboard bill. So Senator Hinkins is running SB 144. I have not had time to read it other than a quick skim, but it looks like it puts further handcuffs on municipalities and counties to regulate billboards. And so the billboard issue is not going away. And we need you to reach out to your legislators and really help them understand the impacts that billboards can have in your community, and that not all billboards are equal. Some are very close to residential areas, some are tall, some are small, but we need them to better understand some of the issues that come with taking away municipal land use on billboards. All right, next slide. Okay, public safety and law enforcement. I'll hand it back to you, Mayor, and then we'll hand it over to John Park. The bill number for Hinkins' bill is SB 144.
Thank you, Victoria. Appreciate that so much. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff. Thank you for keeping up with us. John, I can't see very many of the people, but there you are. John, please take it away.
Yeah, hello everybody. Everybody's trying to change everything there is to do with law enforcement this session, it seems like. The first thing we want to talk about is Senator Reeby's bill, which is Senate Bill 70. Currently in the state of Utah, at least under state statute, there's a requirement that they've created, are to create 5 operating mobile crisis outreach teams. Under this bill, they want to increase that to 14. And what happens is to be able to create that, they're asking for the local health departments to be able to do that, and to help fund that, they've asked for $4.2 million, which is a matching fund grant that requires the locals to come up with 20% of the funds to do that. It's one of the things I really don't understand on that is that I'm assuming a lot of that 20% would just be repurposed at the local level, and so I don't think that's a big deal probably for the locals to be able to do that. But we think it's a good bill, and asking for support. We support that. Any questions?
So John,
yeah,
Terry Malkovich asked how
does Senate Bill 70 and House Bill 53 go together? They really don't. They seem to be going down different paths right now, even though that we're going to talk in a little bit about both HB 53 and Senator Thatcher's proposal that's not a bill yet, in we're calling 988 because it's a crisis line to be able to dial 988 and get a crisis line. This bill is related in some ways, but I don't think they're really that interrelated. The local minute, yeah, okay, yeah. Any other questions? Thanks, Gary. Okay. Do we want to vote on this, or are we just good with the support of the?
So I'm.
We'll do the vote at the end.
Okay, great.
Bill
50. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dawn.
I just wanted to mention, if you have a question and you put it in the chat, if you click on all panelists and attendees, everyone can see it. If you just click on panelists, only 9 of us can see it. And so we're getting a lot of questions about what the questions are. So when you type a question, please click all panelists and attendees, and then everybody can see it, or your comments. Anyway, just wanted to add that. And I wanted to make sure the question from Zach Jacobs of West Jordan went to everyone, because I think that's a valid question, especially in Salt Lake County. We don't even work directly with the health department. So I think that was a really good question. Appreciate that.
Okay.
And we'll take a vote at the end, so.
That's great, thank you. Senate Bill 53, and we'll talk about this a little bit, and then the next slide is on Senator Thatcher's proposal that is not yet a bill, 988. This creates a new license for behavioral emergency service technician. It's much like an EMT or even a paramedic, but not that advanced. It's limited, but the idea behind this is to provide some training, whether it's in a fire department, a police department, or health departments, for someone to be licensed in behavioral emergency services as a technician. We've gone back and forth a lot with Senator Thatcher on this. We don't know how it fits in. There's no requirement for any cities or county or anyone else to hire these technicians. There's no requirement for us to provide that kind of behavioral calls. You know, a special person in any of our departments to be able to do that. So there's really not any problem with it as far as costing us money or anything. It just is. It's just a little odd the way it says right now. So let's put it in perspective by going to the next slide, please. Senator Thatcher is also talking about a 988, and I love the editorial comment there, Victoria. Thankfully, that is not a bill number. We're not there yet. He's been working on this, and we've had at least a couple meetings with him, and the federal government has instituted a national suicide hotline that takes effect in 2022, and currently the kind of hotline that he envisions, Senator Thatcher envisions, is much like a lifeline, which is currently dispatched out of the University of Utah, and they have a phenomenal success rate. They say that when it goes to their offices, that 90% of those calls are stabilized over the phone, and the other 10%, they send someone out, and out of those 10%, 75% of those are solved at the person's residence, and they don't have to transport. So out of 1,000 calls, roughly 75 or 25 will require transport. And so they consider this very, very successful. And as part of that, they want to create a 19-member response force to try to design this. It includes local health officials, police chiefs, sheriffs, fire chiefs, and people like that are assigned by the Senate and the House and those kind of people. we had, you know, part of the problem with that, this is really kind of a two-edged sword as far as I'm concerned, because part of the problem with communications is that the interoperability with local police departments just isn't there right now. In other words, if someone calls 988, where does the call go? That's not decided. Does it go to something like the U, and then how do they dispatch it to, and if it's really a police matter? Some of these things just are not to the point we can figure it out, and so we look forward to this all coming out. But if you go back, so based on all that, what we're asking, what we're suggesting is really what we want to talk about. What we should be talking about, because there really is a bill, is House Bill 53. And based on that, we're asking that we just stay neutral on that. And we've told the sponsor we'll stay neutral on that. If that does not take effect until mid-year 2022. Any questions? Okay, if not, next is, what's up next, Wayne? Next slide, please. Cameron?
Yep, there we go. In addition, in the law enforcement space, we have the bills that the Love, Listen, Lead Task Force has been working on, and they met last week. Several of these bills are actually in committee today. So let's proceed, and we'll give you an update on where some of these are and what our recommendation is for you. First is House Bill 84. This is Representative Romero's bill around use of force reporting requirements. This is actually an attempt to address one of the issues that we've heard over the last 6-7 months as the stakeholder groups have been meeting, which is the lack of statistics and consistent data out there in this space. This language is supported by the Law Enforcement Legislative Committee. The Love, Listen, Lead Task Force also endorsed it last week. So our staff recommendation to LPC is to follow the Love, Listen, Lead endorsement. This is one of multiple bills that deal with the use of force. This bill does not contemplate changing use of force. In fact, the language I put in there in quotations is the heart of the bill about procuring the statistics in accordance with the FBI standards. The bills that are out there around the definition of use of force are still being negotiated. So our task force last week put together some input. The Law Enforcement Legislative Committee's negotiators have been gathering input and working with the different bill sponsors. So as these bills get more meat on the bones, we'll bring them back. But at this point, we're ready for that recommendation to support House Bill 84. Next slide, Carson. Representative Romero also has House Bill 162, which deals with the annual certified training of police officers. This is another one that has been discussed frequently over the last few months. Her original proposal during the summer was actually to increase the number of required training hours from 40 to 56. And then those 16 hours would include courses on mental health, crisis intervention, arrest, control, and de-escalation. Between our task force, Police Chiefs Association, and other groups, we all raised concerns about adding an additional 16 hours to the ongoing requirements. And so after collecting the feedback, she agreed to just fold the 16-hour requirement into the current 40 hours. Again, LELC is committed to support this change. Ditto the Love, Listen, Lead Task Force. Both of these bills are in committee this afternoon. Next bill.
If I may add something to that, Cameron.
Please do.
Yeah, we just got out of Law Enforcement Legislative Committee, and they reported that to that bill, Representative Romero's bill, they just added one little paragraph. It'll be a substitute today for reporting requirements, which shouldn't add any burden to cities because they're already making reporting to post about each individual police officer's training. But that it will be just a change today when it's heard.
Perfect. Perfect. Another bill that we discussed as task force over the summer and now is moving forward is SB 102. And there's an article over the weekend about this. This would address one of the issues that we've saw from our Love, Listen, Lead survey results with the general public and from police officers, and showing that there was a demand for more diversity within our police ranks. And this would open up the qualifications for a peace officer to be individuals who are lawful permanent residents and are authorized to work. So again, Law Enforcement Legislative Committee has supported the bill. Love, Listen, Lead endorsed it. So our recommendation for the overall league is to support this bill as well. Carson, next slide. This bill, House Bill 62, I'm going to turn back over to John to give an update because this was a major centerpiece of the Law Enforcement Legislative Committee this morning, and our Love, Listen, Lead Task Force deliberated on it a few days ago.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. This bill expands post authority. They can now conduct investigations that includes dishonesty, deception, use of force, bias against individuals' race, color, or all of those kind of protected classes. When it originally came out, the Law Enforcement Legislative Committee voted to hold it, and Love, Listen, Lead hasn't determined on that yet. But since the time that originally came out, they made some changes based on some requirements that Love, Listen, Lead asked them to change from the Salt Lake Attorney's Office, and it included, rather than the original bill just said when officer is under investigation or there's suspicious circumstances conducting this kind of conduct, and they changed the wording, and every time they changed the wording to essentially say that if an officer has been found, if the charges have been substantiated either by the department or in the court of law, then post will get involved. And based on, and that was the first substitute that came out. There was an additional tweaking that was added by the LELC today, and based on the changes which they anticipate will be made to that, they voted to support that. So it was actually, they voted to support, as Ashley's pointed out, they voted to support substitute 1, but they also wanted to tweak a little bit of the language, and they were confident that that would happen. So they're right now on support of that. And Love, Listen, Lead hasn't discussed it since those changes were made.
Perfect. So to that end, for purposes of an LPC ratification, we have, in the intermediate time between Love, Listen, Lead task force meetings, if LELC is supportive of a bill and it addresses the concerns that have come up in our meeting, our staff recommendation is to follow LELC. So we are waiting to update the slide until we had that info from LELC, but our recommendation, and the bill is still going to be in committee this afternoon, right, John?
Yeah, it'll still be in committee this afternoon with those changes. And in fact, to just encourage what you just said, the changes that were made between now and the last LLL meeting was because of the changes requested by LLL. So we could be good with that.
So then when we get to the end, the recommendation, staff recommendation would be to support the updated Law Enforcement Legislative Committee position.
Correct.
So John, there's a question from Mayor Arvey from North Salt Lake asking, can you explain the term engages in bias? Now, this is why I wrote this slide last night because I still haven't seen the substitute language, and the substitute language was what was being discussed in the meeting. So, the term I used came from the original version. John, can you address what that looks like now in the substitute version?
I probably can if you give me a minute to look at it. So.
Perfect. While he does that, there are many of you who are on the Love, Listen, Lead Task Force. And let me just give you one other quick update. A lot of our focus was on SB 13, and House Bill 62 is really, it's not quite an extension of SB 13, but it's in the same space as SB 13. And based on some input we received from a couple of cities, we'll be working with Senator Iwamoto to make a couple of minor tweaks to SB 13. Doesn't change the policy, it just clarifies some language. So just as an FYI there.
Okay, what it says,
John,
I can read it. I'm not sure that it clears up what Mayor Arby's talking about. It says, is the subject of an open federal civil rights investigation for engaging in biased or prejudicial conduct against one or more individuals based on an individual's race, color, sex, pregnancy, age, religion, national origin, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And the change is the first part of that, which says, is the subject of an open federal civil rights investigation for engaging, and then the rest of that, it was the original. And so what it is saying is, rather than just someone's idea, it's going to be something that's based on federal civil rights legislation, which really narrowly focuses what can be investigated in that regard.
John, there's also a question from Councilmember Ivy down in Southern Utah about would there be officer training associated with House Bill 62?
House Bill 62 doesn't address any additional training at all, but as we've talked about in some other bills we've already talked about, they want to have. We're seeing a lot of bills that want to talk about the type of training that is required. And why we've been supportive of most of those, it mainly deals with, what we're mainly concerned about is that every hour above the 40 hours that is required for a police officer to have training, that's an hour that he's not on the road. And so that's generally been our concern. But, if you go back to what we talked about in House Bill 162, and 16 hours shall focus on mental health, crisis intervention, or arrest control and de-escalation. And that's really the only bill that we know that kind of addresses this. However, if you have the requirement of post, we believe that our local departments will have the opportunity to adjust their own training. Everybody's required to have 40 hours, and with rare exception, most of that training can be authorized and directed by the local police department, and we think that can be covered in that regard. Any other questions? Oh, Len Arby, sounds good in principle, but will it not generate frivolous lawsuits? I guess that's well, we probably ought to ask an attorney about that, but my opinion on that is that it's a little bit of a two-edged sword, because I think that by some of the wording that we just talked about, things where they narrowed the focus from the original bill to the first substitute, where they have verbiage like, in a state federal law in the course of a police officer performance, the subject of an open federal civil rights investigation for engaging. I don't think there's anything there that expands the right of someone to sue, because quite frankly, if you are in that ballpark anyway, whether this law is there or not. I think that the lawsuit will probably happen. I don't know if Roger or Cameron, you want to opine on that or not.
Roger or Cameron, anything you'd like to add to that? If not, then we will move on to Roger and revenues.
Okay, I think the first bill up is Substitute Senate Bill 18, which is Wayne Harper's bill. This is the one that expands the personal property exemption from 15,000 to 50,000. I've been in multiple meetings the last 2 days, and with education, county assessors, counties, and taxpayers association, and various other groups. Right now, he's going to drop the amount significantly. I think we're talking around 25,000 and make another internal adjustment, which will mean that the revenue hit is going to be probably $2 million statewide. Our share of that's much smaller. The other issue is at what level does this become unconstitutional, because you have an inconsequential standard, and I think the county assessors here are responsible to administer this, think that they're right at that is not over. So it's still in a state of discussion. The first substitute is just technical changes with references, et cetera. So there'll be a different bill. I'm not sure when that'll come up for discussion, but at least know it's trending in the right direction. And I would say stay where we are on our position post. The other bill, there are several property tax bills. This is Senator Fillmore's deferral, which is what I would call the tax reverse mortgage. Basically, you don't have to pay your taxes for a period of years, and then it's paid at the end. It's apparently already being done in some counties. The question is that this mandate that it be done statewide? The issue here is not the policy so much as it is the fiscal mode. And there's a real question on fiscal mode. I'm trying to get some information back. The counties initially said they were not bothered because they were already doing it, but I do think as a revenue hit, I think we ought to stay where we are until that gets clarified.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate those updates. Those are some we'll keep watching closely and be interested to see really if the county decides to change their direction and get a stronger opinion about that bill. Thank you. All right, HB 17, utility permitting amendments.
Okay, there's always a bill that becomes sort of a monstrosity during session for somebody. This is mine. I met length on Friday with representatives from Dominion, the municipal power entities, various other groups. This is the changes that have happened with this bill. And there's a substitute bill that came out just about an hour ago. It is still irksome, irritating, and everything else because it is a preemption, and it's in a preemption that by and large, we have largely viewed this as a province of cities, not the state, and that's true. And that's still there. Its motivation is Dominion's concern that happened in California, that their multi-billion-dollar investment in renewable natural gas could be adversely affected by cities deciding they were going to ban natural gas. And so they're making a concerted effort throughout the country to pass this type of legislation. We're not the only one. But three concerns, aside from the basic preemption, were really that I received from cities were in three areas. One, does this inadvertently affect municipally owned utilities, which are primarily electrical, although we have three natural gas cities as well, the Van Hildale and Nephi. What this bill does now is it applies only to public service regulated energy entities. That is Rocky Mountain Power and Dominion. So all our city-owned utilities are out of the bill in that regard. The second is that could a city still accomplish the goals of incentivizing one energy source over another with incentives? This specifically allows that, even though Representative Pandy already said it did. And the third is that would this affect, we've got buildings that are being planned in cities, does this mean they could not make those natural gas free, energy free, or whatever? This specifically now says cities can do what they want with their own buildings. So the three major concerns that had been voiced to me have now been taken out of the bill and the substitute. The preemption's still there, the basic issue, but we're caught in this quandary. No city's doing it. No city says they want to do it. So we end up with this circular argument. The state Representative Handy saying, I want to preemptively say that we should be doing that. That is a legitimate exercise of state energy policy. Nobody's being hurt. We're against it on principle that we shouldn't be preemptive, but the truth is we don't have anybody doing it. So with these changes that are in mind, my recommendation is we ought to move, and I asked Victoria, do we have a hold your nose neutral position? No, we don't. She was trying to find me an emoji. And I say that for this reason. Could we defeat this bill? It'd be really hard. We would have to make it a major, major priority of the league and mass a lot of resources against it. When I look at the totality of it, the fact that they've made all of the changes that I had suggested, and I might mention, we had representatives from UAMPS and UMPA that were in the discussion. My recommendation is this is going to pass, and I hate having an opposition position on a bill that we're not actively going to oppose. And so my recommendation, we ought to move to a neutral position.
Okay, thank you for that, Roger. Appreciate that. All right, we're to item C, or excuse me, item E, bills from LPC members. So Cam, I'll let you lead out with this and turn it to whoever you need to.
Perfect. I wanted to, before we solicit feedback on other bills, just hit a few other important bills that you have ratified positions for before, but we haven't brought up in a previous LPC, but will be of note to you. So first, you can see House Bill 128. This is, for lack of a better term, the Rainy Day Fund bill. We tried to run this one last year and ran out of time. Then the pandemic struck, and legislators were much more open to the conversation about rainy day funds. So this would boost your rainy day funds in cities from 25 to 35% and 75 to 100% for towns for your accumulated fund balances. House Bill 220, this came out of several discussions at the league board level, not just with our organization, but with others around the state, that the bail system changes that the legislature made last year had some major consequences combined with the impact of the pandemic. And so the legislature wants to press reset. Yep, you're right, Councilmember Jacob, House Bill 128. We testified in committee a few days ago, so it's more just making sure people are aware if they get asked. The House Bill 220 repeals the bill from last year, basically like a reset. Representative Schultz is running that bill. House Bill 247 deals with transient room tax, and it focuses on this audit component in counties with smaller populations. This was a part of the TRT bill that we were supportive of and helped negotiate last year. But because of the pandemic, the tax commission ended up not having sufficient revenue for the auditing provision. So this has been a priority within our resort communities for a while. And so this is the starting point here with House Bill 247. And then SB 82, this bill in and of itself just creates a sub-fund within the Transportation Investment Fund. But the bigger issue is its continued progress toward the implementation of the road usage charge program, which the league has strongly supported going back to its inception in 2017. So when it's all said and done, 10 years from now, we may look back and say that the creation of this little sub-fund as part of this overall effort may be the most important thing we do this legislative session, but time will tell. There are other bills that we are still waiting for. For example, last week we told you we were expecting the more draconian accessory dwelling unit bill, and as expected, it came out this morning in House Bill 273. We are anticipating the Economic Development Commission bill. That should be a consensus bill. There's been a lot of stakeholder involvement. The league will have a statutory place on that commission. We're still anticipating the Commission on Housing Affordability bill. There are multiple things that could be in it, ranging from increasing the menu items that the city has to select in order to qualify for state transportation funding, as well as other transparency around local building fees and a variety of other tools to help low-income Utahns. We're still having lengthy discussions around bills to facilitate the construction of transit-oriented developments and transit-oriented developments that have high levels of connectivity in transportation to the surrounding region, that have many housing units, particularly for those who are moderate income, and fit into the overall planning of the network. There's been a lot of discussions there. And we're still anticipating the bill about a potential Utah Lake Authority. That Utah Lake Authority bill was referred to a little over a week ago as a MIDA type bill when it was presented to the Utah Lake Commission. And again, still waiting for the details about what that would mean, both individually for the cities surrounding Utah Lake and for local government authority in general. So those are some big issues that are still out there that are still to come. As we have been focusing our efforts over the last few days on House Bill 82 and House Bill 98 and SB 61, the big three of the land use, the problematic land use bills, your feedback is vital. I mentioned during the 82 component of this conversation that we'll be sending you a follow-up survey this afternoon to help inform our officers and negotiating team as we are meeting with the different stakeholders in the next couple of days. So when you get that survey this afternoon, please fill it out as soon as possible. We'll keep it as simple as we can, but please fill it out so that we have that additional feedback. If there's also any additional feedback that people have on 82, you're still welcome to put it in the chat box to make sure that we have it. With that, before I open it up for other bills from LPC members, let me just kind of make one more point on House Bill 82. What we've been hearing from the membership has been that generally there's support for ADUs and generally there's support for owner-occupied internal ADUs. Really the question is where does it make sense, and what's the role of the city in determining where it makes sense, and whether that's through the zoning power or whether that's through certain regulations after the fact. That's really the space that the negotiating team is going to be working on. So as you think about it in that context, and you have additional thoughts, make sure we get them immediately, and make sure you fill out the survey when it comes later this afternoon. So with that, are there other bills that people want to put on our radar screen or bring up for future consideration? Okay, yeah, House Bill 236. Someone, Craig Hall, posted that in the Q&A. This deals with waste tires, and we as staff have recommended a position of support on this bill for purposes of the ratification vote here in just a moment. The bill really gets to a fairness issue between private landfills and public landfills. Give me 30 seconds. I'll find my notes on this bill to make sure I've got the details right before I keep talking. Yeah, so a private waste transporter can get reimbursed for the cost of transporting tires to a tire recycler, but publicly owned landfills cannot get the same reimbursement. So this would allow that same reimbursement. So again, it's a fairness issue on this one, and our staff recommendation was to support. Are there any other bills or issues that people want to bring up, either that are currently in the bill tracker and people want more context, or other bills that they want to bring up for consideration? Oh, Paul, sorry. Gravel pits. So Victoria, I'm trying to decide if I want you to take the arrows on this one or if I should just do it. I feel like I should just do it since I'm already talking. You're welcome. Yeah, at this point, we are not anticipating any gravel pit legislation. We had floated a couple of different options that would have, we floated a couple of different options to try to address in the 2021 session, but there just was not, yeah, the arrows should go to the industry, but there was not any appetite unless all the stakeholders were willing to come to the table. And at this point, we're still waiting for the pit operators on a few major issues. So our plan is to re-engage after the session and continue to try to find that common ground. And if we can't find common ground, then strategize accordingly from there. We know it's cities that are dealing with the moratorium are growing in frustration, and certainly get that. Victoria, is there anything you want to add after I took the initial arrows?
No, thanks, Cam.
Okay, Mayor Burton from West Jordan asked about House Bill 142, which is Representative Carol Moss's cyclist traffic amendments, which is about active transportation. Carson, can I put you on the spot for the quick update on that bill?
Yeah, that's Representative Moss has run this bill for the past 3 or 4 years. I believe LELC is opposing it this year. I try to find my notes somewhere here. We have a staff recommendation of oppose, I believe, on that bill right now, just out of a public safety concern. The bill would allow cyclists to treat a red light as a four-way stop if there's no other vehicles around. So we've heard we've heard public safety concerns. Mayor Burton, if there's a motion to change that position, we can. Or we're happy to continue watching the bill. I don't think it's moving particularly quickly. So, oh, there's a motion. Is there a second?
So Mayor Ramsey, just procedurally here, when we get to the overall staff ratification, if there's a motion to change any of the staff recommendations, then Roger will walk through how we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll pull that bill out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who don't know enough about that bill to weigh in on whether or not we change the position at this point. Is it still a moving target? I mean, is this still a fluid bill, or does it look like it's a kind of a done deal? Or
my guess would be is that there's still time in the session. So if we want to change our position next week, we can do that, but I'll defer to the body on that choice.
Personally, for me, I've not read through that bill, and I don't feel like I have enough information about it to weigh in, really. Andrew Gruber says WFRC supports HB 142. The bill passed out of committee. It warrants more discussion. So we have a motion by Mayor Burton of West Jordan to change the position.
So Mayor Ramsey, before we jump to that motion, let's see if there are any other bills that people want to bring up, and then when we get to the votes, then Roger can walk you through pulling that. Does that work, Roger?
Yeah.
Okay, so Councilmember Jacob looks like put in the House Bill, was it House Bill 154? Yeah, so Councilmember Jacob asked about House Bill 154. So this is the bill that I mentioned earlier on the use of force, that there are negotiations ongoing with 154 and SB 106 about use of force in general. So the language that's currently online and publicly available is not going to be the language that will ultimately be considered by the legislature. There are a lot of moving pieces, which is why we've kept it at TBD, and we've been raising concerns to the bill sponsors and with the other stakeholders. Okay, SB 65, and then Victoria, do you mind quickly hitting Aaron Wells' question on House Bill 143 while I pull up SB 65?
Sure. So HB 143 is Representative Malloy's bill. He feels strongly that a suspension of a driver's license should not be used for someone who has judgments against them, is delinquent on fees with criminal convictions. And We've heard from prosecutors that this is a problematic bill, that the driver's license is an effective tool, and courts are wary of using warrants instead of the driver's license suspension. I testified in committee against the bill. It was also raised that the bill does not allow suspension of a driver's license for traffic violations. Representative Malloy has said that that is not the case, that it allows suspension for failure to appear. But when I've talked to some of our prosecutors, it's clear that it may be that you can suspend for failure to appear, but if you were actually sentenced and fail to pay the fines, the bill will still not allow you to suspend a driver's license. Although I testified and we are opposed, Representative Malloy reached out to me. It's been circled on the House floor, which has been surprising because it really sailed through committee. I sent an email to him this morning trying to pinpoint that, again, for us, we would at least like to focus on why you cannot suspend a driver's license in cases involving traffic violations. And I'm waiting to hear back from him on that. And then Cam, I think you've talked to Representative Brammer about the fees bill, and it's our understanding that he's not pursuing that this year.
Yeah, well, when I talked to him last week, he was considering not running it. So I don't want to say it won't come out, but based on the feedback he was getting, he wasn't sure if he was going to proceed. Okay. Then SB 65 is a CRA bill. We spent a lot of time in previous LPCs, and there was a motion, if memory serves, there was a motion to oppose that failed, and because of the division within the LPC and not reaching a 60%, and the staff believing we weren't going to reach a 60% threshold, we decided to recommend no, just stick with no position. So that's what we've continued with, is no position.
Yeah, there's a difference between neutral and no position.
Yeah. And that's one where I think if we were going to change the position, we probably ought to do that be an agenda item, since we've had a debate on that one before, but I'll defer to the will of the group. I also think, we do also have a comment here from Moab. If we support ULCT positions except one, then how do we? We will. Yeah, how do we acknowledge that? So you could. So Raj, I'll let you explain that.
The staff positions are what the staff positions are. You don't change the position. The question is, are you to adopt those positions in the official position of the LPC? We've had a request on one bill to adopt a position different than the recommendations. So Mayor Ramsey, my suggestion is we pull that bill out and vote on that separately. And then we can see if then we can look to adopt all the other positions.
Great.
Yeah, so if there are other bills, for example, that league position is recommendation of neutral, but you want to make a position of opposed, bring that up after we do 142, so we can do those individually and then do the full staff, full ratification of staff.
I have a question about 142, if I may. Our current position is opposed, and I know that you talked about safety. Wasatch Front Regional Council supports it. We have a motion by Mayor Burton to change our position to support. We don't have a second yet. What I'm wondering is, how does LELC, is that what they are? That's what it's called, right? That's their acronym for our Public Safety Officers Legislative Committee. Yeah, how do they feel about it?
So I am double checking my LELC list. Carson, do you recall off the top of your head?
I don't have their updated list, but their last list I have doesn't have a position.
Yeah, their updated list, they don't have a position either.
So then, Mayor Ramsey, we do have a second, it looks like, on it. I swear I saw a second. But we could also, if the motion is to support, we could also go to TBD and the request from the LPC could be to just coordinate with LELC to look at the concerns, so it can switch to TBD. That way, for those of you who haven't seen the bill and are concerned about what the reason was for LELC, we could do that.
Okay, I've looked back through all of the chat and cannot find a second to Mayor Burton's motion, but I do have a substitute.
We now have yep, there you go.
There's a substitute motion to move it to TBD until we can get more information, and a second on that motion.
Yeah.
All right, so at this point we will.
Carson, we have 122 voters, is that right?
I didn't see that count.
But I have to know that to know what 2/3 is.
Well, I'll open up the voting system, and then Roger, if you just want to look through and see if we can. I believe we had 70 people cast votes on the last question. So I believe the last one I saw was 70, but there could be more voters who didn't.
If it's 122, we need 74 voters, or 73.
All right, I've opened up.
Right, but it's not going to be 122 because it'll be the ones who are signed in as voting. So that'll be that 70 number. And we've lost a few people because it's gone in the afternoon. So just as an FYI there.
At this point, I am going to ask us to vote on whether or not you support moving 142 to TBD for our position. If you do, please vote 1. If you don't, vote 2. If you are going to abstain, vote 3. That's the motion on the table. And we've got a couple of votes in the chat that are not able to connect to the other voting platform. Looks like we've got, so Carson, please just take those into account, I guess, when we're looking at this.
5.
This is a bill I wasn't very aware of, actually at all aware of at this point. And so I appreciate Mayor Burton, bringing it to our attention. It's just not one that I've read through. And I think many of us are that way because it's not one that's taken a great deal of time and effort yet on behalf of the league. And so this will be a good one to look at, a good discussion to have. And I appreciate Mayor Burton bringing it forward, and we'll wait to hear when we have enough votes to make a determination about whether or not we change our current position or not.
Roger, I believe we're at the 70% threshold since the last vote was 70.
So you're talking number of voters, right?
Yeah.
70, so you need 60% of the 70. Okay.
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and close the vote now. Calculating.
Okay, thank you. We have that vote, and it looks like we have quite a strong majority that would like to make our position to be determined and do a little bit more work and talk to our public safety officers and see if they have any concerns, and we'll get some feedback from Wasatch Front Regional Council and why they are supportive of this bill, and have additional discussion. We'll have more information next week, and hopefully be in a position to make a more determined either way position. But Mayor Burton, thank you for bringing this forward. Appreciate that. Okay. You can see on your screen that we have a list of the bills and the positions that are being recommended by the staff. If there is a specific bill that you would like to pull out because you would like to change our official position by motion and a vote, then you can let me know that in the chat at this point. Otherwise, I am prepared to accept a motion And I'm just looking to make sure that I'm keeping up. We get a lot of chats as panelists, so bear with us. We appreciate your patience as we're trying to keep up. Otherwise, I'm prepared to.
Mayor Ramsey, let me just add that House Bill 62 would be support rather than TBD for the reasons that John articulated.
Oh yes, the post certification amendments that was discussed. Yeah, that was discussed. Okay. We have, I'm not prepared to change HB 17 from opposed to neutral.
Then vote against this, then pull it out. Or you can vote against adoption.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, that option, we have a motion and a second to approve the list by staff, but we have comments not prepared to, they're coming in so fast. Bear with me as I find the right comments now. Not prepared to change.
Mayor Ramsey, can I just make a quick clarification on the HB 62?
Yes.
HB 62 that John Park presented, a lot of deliberation at LELC today, so we're anticipating the amendments, right, John? So it's
right.
So this would be support, assuming that the amendments that were agreed upon 2 hours ago the agreement 2 hours ago would be in.
Right. Correct.
So again, there are a couple of people who have texted the panel or commented to the panelists that they want to change the staff recommended positions. So if you do make a motion to pull it out of the staff recommended positions, and we'll do like we did with 142. Corinne, you referenced opposing HB 98. So we're still opposed. So this is another good clarifying one. So the reason we suggested going to amend, based on what Victoria presented, is that the other stakeholders are prepared to scale the bill back considerably. And so if the scope of the bill is scaled back, our recommendation is to negotiate and amend the bill accordingly. So we're still not saying we're supportive. We're saying we're willing to engage in those conversations about the narrower scope, but we're still opposed to the full scope of House Bill 98.
But our
so
position is
if you disagree with that, yeah, our position is opposed to the underlying bill, but the direction to staff is to work on amending it based on that narrow scope. So if you disagree with that direction to staff, now's the time. Likewise, if you disagree with anything else, then make a motion to pull it out. Otherwise, I think Mayor Ramsey, I think you had you do have a motion to approve the list unless somebody brings a substitute motion to pull one of these out for individual consideration.
There are a lot of chats here to the panelists that I'm just looking to see if there is any official motion to pull anything out. I'm not seeing.
Yes, Kate Brad, yeah, not to pull anything out yet. So Kate Bradshaw moved to approve the list and Jewel Allen seconded it. And then there are a couple of people who said that they're concerned with a couple of positions. One has just responded that she's okay with the explanation. And then it's up to the other LPC member if they want to make a change or not.
Okay, you've got a motion and a second, Mayor.
Got a motion and a second. So at this point, please vote in the chat. All in favor of approving the staff recommended positions this week, as listed on your screen, please vote. And if you're unable to vote and you're a voting member, if you weren't here earlier in the meeting to register to vote with the software, you can let us know in the chat.
Carson, I can't see the vote, so you'll have to tell me when we're.
So again, if anybody's having difficulties or if they close the web, I'll link the web page again. So if you click on that, link, then that's, if you're an LPC voter and click on that link, then you'll cast your vote with that page. Roger, by my count, we have about 42 people who have cast votes so far. I have seen that we're losing quite a few participants, so we're not sure how many voters we currently have active. Maybe we just give another minute or two.
Yeah, let's leave it open for another minute. At this point in time, if you're not there, we'll assume you're gone.
Great. Okay, last call for votes. If you are a voting member of LPC and are going to vote on this, Carson has reposted the link to vote, or you can vote in the chat, but he's reposted the link in the chat if you need it. I haven't seen it change for a while.
I think you can deem the voting closed, Mayor.
I think so. I think so. All right, Carson, let's close it and see how everybody feels.
It's closing currently. Just takes a moment.
Okay. All right. Well, 95% passes. So at this point, we will press forward with the staff recommended positions, and we will revisit all of these next Monday. We appreciate you all being here with us. Very quickly before we adjourn, I certainly don't know all of your birthdays, but I know a couple. And I know that today is Councilmember Tasha Lowry of Draper and Mayor Jolie Fulmer of Vineyard's birthdays. So happy birthday to both of you. And if it's somebody else's birthday today, and I'm sorry I missed you, or anytime we meet, somebody can shoot me a heads up and I'm happy to announce it and really wish a happy birthday to our league members. But those are two I do know of today. So with that, unless there's anything else, Cam or Victoria, Carson, Roger, John, Wayne, unless there's anything else, I am prepared to accept a motion to adjourn and to remind you all that we will be here same time, same place next week. All right, we have a motion to adjourn and a second, and I'm not even going to take a vote. This meeting is adjourned, and thank you all for being part of the League Army. You can see the contact information for the staff up there if you have any questions, if you need anything, if you need anything from any of the officers, please let us all know. We appreciate your engagement and your efforts, and look forward to the day we can see you in person. Until then, be safe, and thank you for being part of this effort.
Thanks, everybody.